There's a question here that could be it could be summarized in a way by in essence asking you if we're still evolving after 4 billion years.
Well, evolution tends to go in fits and starts, but even at its fastest, evolution is too slow normally to be seen in one lifetime. There are occasional exceptions to that. In the ancestor's tale, one of the tales is the cichlid fish's tale, which is the story of the cichlid fishes in Lake Victoria in Africa. We know that Lake Victoria is only about 15,000 years old, and yet there are in Lake Victoria about 450 separate species of cichlid fish, which appear to have evolved only in Lake Victoria and within the last 15,000 years. So that's very, very fast evolution going on in Lake Victoria. But 15,000 years is still quite a long time. And so when people ask the question, I'm very often asked that question, are humans still evolving? You have to remember that if it's true, it's unlikely that we would see it. You'd have to come back in maybe 3 or 4 million years in order to see anything major. Now, 3 million years ago, our ancestors were, we know from fossils, pretty certain what they were like. They were like chimpanzees walking on their hind legs. They had the brains, they had the heads of chimpanzees, but they walked on 2 legs as we do. So in the last 3 million years, there has been a dramatic swelling of the brain. The skull has blown up like a balloon. If that trend were to continue, and we were to come back in 3 million years, we would see our descendants with gigantic bulbous heads. But there is no reason to expect the trend to continue. In order for the trend to continue, it's necessary that natural selection favors the brainiest individuals, the individuals with the biggest brains, as the generations go by. We know that must have happened in the past because the fossils tell us the brain has indeed got bigger. But in order for it to go on, it's necessary that brainier individuals either survive better than smaller-brained individuals or reproduce better. Well, they certainly must reproduce better, whether as a result of surviving or perhaps some other reason. Darwin's other theory was the theory of sexual selection that pointed out that survival is only a means to the end of reproduction. And if, for example, being brainy was sexually attractive, if our ancestors found the cleverest members of the opposite sex the most attractive, because they were clever, because they had big brains perhaps, then this would provide the necessary selection pressure. I don't think there's any good evidence that brainier, cleverer, larger-brained, not that larger brains do make you clever, that's another problem. They must have done in some sense, or we couldn't have had the evolutionary trend that we've had. But if you look at the modern population, people with big heads are no cleverer than people with small heads. So why would there be selection in favor of braininess? No particular reason. Could there be selection in favor of something else? Well, it's pretty difficult to die young in civilized parts of the world now. So unlike in our evolutionary history, when most individuals never made it to reproductive age, most individuals died before reproducing. And so genes that made you die young didn't get passed on. That's ordinary natural selection. Nowadays, that doesn't happen. Nowadays, at least in parts of the world like this, if you want to reproduce, you can. The difference seems to be in how many children you have, given that you have survived. Suppose that there's a significant proportion of people who are born because their parents were incompetent at using contraception. If there's any genetic tendency to be incompetent or to fumble at the crucial moment, then there would be, by definition, natural selection in favor of incompetence or fumbling. And so we might see a trend in a few million years towards contraceptive ineptitude. I'm being facetious, but I'm trying to get across what it would take in order for there to be evolution. And note that it's got to be sustained for a long time. Whatever it takes to be incompetent at using today's contraception is pretty unlikely to be what it will take to be incompetent at using the contraception of a million years' time, if any, because things will be so different, because technology will be so different, that it's very, very hard to predict any particular trends in future evolution. If we go into outer space, it might be different. There you might genuinely get a divergence into two different species.
Okay, Richard, a little teasing here from Paula Fadu. She wants to know if you're afraid of death.
I'm not looking forward to the process of dying, mainly because, unlike my dog and your horse and your cat, I will not have the privilege of being able to go to the vet and be painlessly put to sleep. I want to die under general anesthetic, and because I'm human, I'm unique among species in not being allowed to do that. There is a widespread bigotry against euthanasia or assisted suicide, which means that most of us are condemned to suffer when we die, whereas our pets are allowed to die under a general anesthetic. So I am not looking forward to dying. As for being dead, I shan't miss life. As Mark Twain said, I was dead for billions of years before I was born and never suffered the slightest inconvenience. If I were told that I was going to die very soon, I would be deeply disappointed because I love life and I intend to go on loving life for as long as possible, so I would indeed be very disappointed. I don't think that's quite the same as fear. It is disappointment. If I were religious, I might very well be afraid of death because I might very well be afraid of what was coming to me after death. I have an Australian friend who once rather irreverently and unkindly remarked that if you go into churches, you very often see very old people, and he expressed it as, I try to do the Australian accent, which may not come across the translation, cramming for the final.